On this edition of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast, Barrhead's Devery Keere joins us to talk about his journey in the baseball world and where he'd like to go from here. Welcome to episode 71 of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. I'm Joe McFarland. The Keere name is synonymous with baseball in the Barrhead area, northwest of Edmonton. Keith was a standout pitcher with the Barrhead Blue Jays and was a member of the Canadian national team before turning his attention to coaching and teaching. He was Baseball Alberta's Ted Rudd Minor Coach of the Year in 2000 and 2002 and was made a Baseball Alberta Life Member in 2011. So it's pretty easy to see why his son Devery would pick up a bat and excel at the sport. A star with his hometown teams as a youngster, he went on to Phoenix Junior College and Louisiana-Lafayette before being drafted by the Kansas City Royals in the 48th round of the 2007 MLB Draft. After a couple of years with Idaho Falls in the Pioneer League, he went down his own path, traveling the world while playing and coaching. Now 34, Keere is in Vancouver and has his eyes set on wearing the maple leaf. We chatted with him earlier this week about where he's been, where he's going, and some of the lessons he's learned along the way. Devery, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, nice to be here with you today. Thanks for the call.
Take us back to the very beginning and how a kid from Barrhead, Alberta, manages to find himself in a career of baseball.
Yeah, my first memories are from my father. I remember being a little kid crawling through the crawl space and opening up these boxes and seeing Team Canada memorabilia from my dad. And it was just so fascinating to see pictures of him basically around the world, whether it was Guatemala, Nicaragua, Korea, and then eventually listening to some of his stories. And so that's kind of the first memories off the field, just seeing pictures and maybe hearing a few stories. And so the love of the game definitely grew from there.
Was it weird at the time, given that, here you are in Alberta where we're talking always about hockey or maybe football enters the mindset, but here you are going through some memories of baseball's past?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about when I was 14, 15 years old. I was a big kid and I was a pretty decent hockey player, but hockey was never a focus for me. It was always baseball. And so despite the short season that we have in Alberta, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to pursue baseball. I knew baseball was my love. Did I enjoy hockey? Yeah, still do. Still enjoy watching it. But it's always been inside of me, just this passion for baseball. And as I said, it obviously came from my dad's influence.
As you got older, were you able to maybe poke and prod for a few stories just to get a sense of where all your dad had been?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorites would be his time in Central America. So he talks, he just gives a few details, right? Not everything. He doesn't want to scare you, but he talks about his time in Nicaragua. And there's semi-automatic guns in the dugout, and there's obviously, a couple of security guards in there making sure that nothing bad is going to happen to Team Canada. And so hearing a story of that is it's exciting. It's obviously a little bit nervous, but just listening to some of the stories of him in Central America, it sounds like an adventure. And then, naturally I pursued baseball and traveling also. So I was pretty fortunate.
Now take us through some of your journey, because obviously Barrhead's not exactly the place that is going to be front and central for baseball, but you managed to carve out quite the name for yourself. When did you start to notice that, hey, maybe I might be able to take this game a little further than the average kid who just happens to like this sport?
I think it started to make sense when I was regularly being picked up by teams to go to nationals, like when Barrhead didn't win, or when I was selected for Team Alberta. And, I think about when we were in PEI when I was 12 years old, I was the top hitter for Team Alberta, and so I was awarded a baseball bat. And then, I obviously pitched at the under-17 championship in Melville in, I think it was 2001 or 2002. And I pitched 6 2/3 scoreless. And so this is versus some of the best players in the country. And so things, I think, just slowly started to unfold. Like I realized that I was a decent player, but I really wanted to do something with my career. So I guess the funny thing about that Team Alberta experience was they never let me hit. And as I decided to move on with my baseball career, I had to be a walk-on. There's no recruiting in Barrhead, Alberta for college baseball programs. And so I was a walk-on at Phoenix College. And my first day, I still had not decided if I was going to pursue pitching or if I wanted to hit. And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of a motivation for me also. When people tell me that I can't do things, it drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely crazy, especially as an athlete. And so at 17 years old, competing in the Canada Cup, and they wouldn't let me hit. It just fueled this fire inside of me. And so, yeah, fast forward a couple of years later there when I'm at basically the fall tryouts at Phoenix College. Okay, well, I'm throwing 85, 86, 87 miles an hour. All these other guys are throwing 90 and have curveballs. I don't have a curveball. I've got a forkball. I decided at that point, okay, well, let's pursue hitting. Let's forget about the pitching from now on.
Was that a difficult transition for you, or were you able to, because, being in Alberta, you probably had to do a whole bunch of everything, you were able to make that transition fairly easily?
I think the difficult part was, number one, being away from home for the first time, and it wasn't like it was just a couple-hour drive. It was a couple-hour flight. A big adjustment, too, was, day one, the weather, Joe, was 45 degrees. Day one, Phoenix College, I'm a college baseball player trying to be, and it's 45 degrees. I'm like, I've never experienced this in Barrhead, Alberta before, right? But I think the transition came pretty naturally. I was a decent athlete, and I had a big passion for the game. So my first year in the States, I was on the field every day. And so naturally, I improved more than a lot of the other guys.
Did that make it maybe a little bit easier for you with that transition into being just a hitter? Was just the mindset of, hey, I'm away from home. I don't want to be sitting in the dorm room or in the apartment or wherever I am. I can go to the field and I can work on this day after day after day?
Yeah, it's interesting how it unfolded. I don't think my arm would have been able to handle just what pitchers have to go through. So slowly I started to learn about hitting. I didn't know much coming from northern Alberta. My hitting coach was John Osborne, who is another Barrhead baseball name, and then my dad, and that's kind of the extent of my hitting coaches. And it was very minimal, right? And so I kind of had to start from day one. I remember being 18, 19, and I had coaches who really believed in me, Coach Frady and Coach Reynolds at Phoenix College. But they weren't awesome hitting coaches. They were awesome just coaches in general and somebody who believed in me. So I really had to learn how to hit, and I learned by doing. I learned by basically the teammates that I had. And it slowly started to make sense. Actually, when I was at Phoenix College after my first year, I was a little frustrated with the lack of hitting coach. And so you remember Dave Robb? Do you remember that baseball name? Yeah,
absolutely.
So
Okotoks Dogs.
Yeah, so he was involved with Mesa Community College, which was one of our rivals at Phoenix College. And so I actually went and did a few private hitting lessons with him, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about hitting. I just didn't feel like I was getting instructed well enough, and actually considered transferring to Mesa, but he kind of advised against it, just didn't want to cause any internal issues. And so I stuck with Phoenix College, which actually turned out to be a pretty good thing. I hit 350. It's a Woodback conference. I hit 350 my second year. And I remember playing versus Mesa at home at Phoenix College. And I had 3 doubles, and Dave Robb was just kind of sitting there shaking his head thinking, oh, we should have taken this guy.
So then you end up going over to University of Louisiana-Lafayette, and you end up in 2007 getting drafted by the Kansas City Royals. Do you remember where you were when you got that phone call or you got that message saying, hey, the Royals are interested?
Yeah, I actually had kind of given up because despite a really good junior year, I had 2 months where things really fell apart, and it was not at the best time. And so I was driving. I was with a friend. We were driving to, I don't know, a mall or something, and it was the middle of the draft, and I had kind of decided that it wasn't going to happen. But luckily, one scout stuck with me through that difficult 2-month period, and that was, one of the best moments of my life, to realize it wasn't a prank phone call, and despite it being a very late round, I was about to sign a professional baseball contract.
You mentioned how you don't like being told you can't do something, and so even despite that late round, did you have it in your mind that, hey, I've got to try to make a name for myself here, and you get into Idaho Falls and played particularly well?
Yeah, that's just kind of been my story, and it's a good message, I think, to the young listeners out there, Joe. And it is kind of cliche, right? But you have to believe in yourself. And I was absolutely fueled by people not believing in me. I can think about summer baseball in Virginia. The coach didn't believe in me. I can think about summer baseball in New England. The coach did believe in me. I can think about my coaches with the Royals my first year in the minors. They absolutely did believe in me. And it was a new start. And yeah, it's unfortunate that it ended after 2 years. I enjoyed my 2 years with the Royals, but I just didn't think the best of me was out. And so again, that's a common theme. It drove me nuts that the Royals didn't believe in me at that point.
As you look back on all of your travels, be it in North America or across the world, any favorite memories that come to mind?
Starting in Alberta, without a doubt, we somehow, obviously through my dad, but we won provincials 3 times, the little town of Barrhead. 1 time was AA, and then 2 times, both bantam and midget, we won AAA provincials. And so we loved nothing more than just beating the big city boys, and we got a town of 4,000 people. It was so satisfying. So that for me was the highlight of my the first half of my life, really, in Alberta. Traveling, went to PEI and Windsor and to Melville and then to Trois-Rivières and then just a whole bunch of wonderful experiences in Alberta. Phoenix College, kind of like I said, the one thing that sticks out is that my second year, and then especially that game versus Dave Robb, and I actually wonder if he remembers that game. In summer ball, as I said, I was in Virginia and then in New England. One of the highlights was I was chosen to be in the home run derby in the NECBL, the New England Collegiate Baseball League, and throwing terrible batting practice was none other than Tommy John. So that was a highlight. At the University of Louisiana-Lafayette, that is an absolutely amazing place to play baseball. We played in front of 2,000 to 3,000 fans, sometimes more. And the environment was electric. It was an honor. Honestly, that time at Louisiana-Lafayette, those 2 years were better than my 2 years playing in the minor leagues. It was pretty special. But, just then going on to memories, I think about actually Eric Hosmer's first professional day in a dugout. I had expected that I would be sitting the rest of the year after he signed his big contract. And so I was pretty sick that day, and I'll let the listeners try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But we got to the field, and they said, actually, we want Hosmer to watch, so Devery, you're going to play today. So I wasn't feeling very well, and ended up having the best baseball day of my life. I was 4 for 6. I think I had 7 RBIs, a couple bombs, and Hosmer afterwards said, "Oh, is this what I'm getting myself into?" So, and then finally the time in Europe was really special. If you'd have told me that I was going to stay there for 8 years coaching baseball. I'd have said, you're crazy. The plan was 6 months. But I ended up doing, I opened up a little sports consultation business, and I did work in Austria, Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, England, Greece, Croatia. And it just exploded into this really interesting business where I did work for the Austrian Baseball Federation. I worked for Major League Baseball International. I would independently run baseball camps and then, of course, coach full-time the Dornbirn Indians. So I just, as I said at the beginning, Joe, I just fell in love with traveling and with baseball, and I just don't see an end. It's a huge passion of mine, and so I went to Vietnam. And the goal was not for baseball, but I ended up volunteering for about 10 days with 2 different baseball clubs in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And then same thing, about 12 months ago, I was in Hong Kong. And actually, baseball in Hong Kong is not bad. So I spent 2 weeks volunteering with the Hong Kong Baseball Federation. And so, as I said, I just don't see my travels stopping anytime soon. My wife supports it. And, yeah, it's something we're very passionate about.
Hard to believe when you look back on all that time that you've been able to accomplish so much, especially given that you're this Alberta boy who wasn't necessarily expected to get as far as you have, and yet here you are, blazing your own trail.
Yeah, and as I kind of said earlier, I don't look back on the past too much. I really am a forward thinker, and so for me, I appreciate you interviewing me and making me introspect a little bit. It's been enjoyable the last couple of days, just kind of jotting a few things down. But my focus is forward. And so the ultimate goal was to follow in Dad's footsteps and wear that Team Canada jersey across my chest. Unfortunately, it didn't happen as a player. I feel like it was close, but it didn't happen. And so I can only hope that Greg Hamilton and the Team Canada staff somehow gets to know who I am and somehow believes in me. And so I feel like I'm making the right steps to get there at some point in the next, hopefully, 5 years. You might be familiar with the NCCP training. Mm-hmm. I'm finishing up that, and I've actually been selected by David Lang here at Baseball BC to represent BC, and so I'll finish my training along with one coach from each province. And so we're going to be in Florida in April. And there's a really good Masters of High Performance Coaching at UBC that I hope to enter. And I just really think these are the right steps moving forward so I can ultimately get that Canadian jersey across my chest.
Well, and one of the things, like you said, we talked a little bit about just wanting to look forward more than look back. And so I'm curious from that standpoint then, as you look forward, how important is it for you to be able to give back to the game that you've been able to attach yourself to, one, and then two is to be able to be a teacher of the game as well, because I know that's what your father did as well, was a teacher.
Yeah, I get so much satisfaction working with young baseball players and then seeing the results. I remember working so hard with a kid in Austria, and he eventually hit his first home run. And just to see that joy on his face it's priceless to me. And I've never made these decisions for money. As you know, there's not a lot of money in baseball in this country. And so for me, it is about giving back. It is about passing on what I have. I feel like I have some good information, some good experiences that some young athletes can hopefully benefit from. And again, both my parents are actually teachers, and that's the environment that I grew up in. I grew up in an athletic house and a house where you need to be educated and you need to focus on education. And so, yeah, what am I doing now? The last 2+ years, I'm in Vancouver and I am a full-time baseball instructor. I am basically a teacher. What am I teaching? I am teaching athletic movements. I'm teaching baseball-specific movements. And I really feel like I apply some of the things that my parents do, as they're wonderful educators. And I feel like I apply some of the things that I've learned from them as I'm teaching baseball.
Was there one piece of advice that you've received over the years that has stuck with you throughout your entire journey that you still live by to this day?
For me, it's about cognitive development. Ultimately, the advice that I've gotten along the way from my parents, from a guy like Alan Jagger, who I met in college, from, I'm very much into Eastern philosophy, and it's all the same message. It's about all that happens to you is the result of what is in your mind. And baseball is the perfect example of that. You see all sorts of professional baseball players with perfect baseball swings. What's the difference between the guy with a perfect baseball swing who hits 320 and the guy with a perfect baseball swing who hits 220? Well, the difference is between the ears. And so for me, that also translates off the field. It's not just an on-the-field deal here. I really believe in personal development, and if part of that happens through sports, that's wonderful. But it's ultimately about taking care of your those 50,000 thoughts that you're having every day.
As you think about where you want to go from a coaching perspective, do you care about what level you're trying to coach? Are you hoping maybe younger kids, college level, maybe the girls' game? Is there anywhere in particular that you'd love to focus on as you go forward?
I'm very open. I've kind of given up this idea of having a 5-year plan. Things come my way, and I've always been very grateful for that. This full-time job I have here in Vancouver, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. What is coming next and when is it coming? I have absolutely no idea. But I'm very open to whatever it is that is coming, and I'm also working while I wait for what could be the next opportunity. And as I said, I hope it is leading towards Team Canada.
For those that you do coach, what is one piece of advice that maybe you give to them that you would love to pass along to maybe some of those younger people who might be listening to this podcast today?
Be a student of the game. When I was in junior high and in high school, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have smartphones. These kids can see what professional baseball players are doing with their swings, with their throwing motion. They have access to everything that they need, and learn as much as you can. You hear it all the time, even from the guys that have been around baseball for 60 years, how they're still learning things. Well, I remember when I was 14, and John Urcandia took me with the Okotoks guys to Oliver, BC, and I thought I knew everything. I was 14 years old, and I thought I knew everything. And so the biggest advice is just learn as much as you can.
Final question for you. As you've had the opportunity now to kind of take a look back at your journey and also a chance to look forward, what does it mean to you to have been able to take this journey and go as far as you have gone and continue to strive for more in the baseball world?
Yeah, I really believe in lifelong learning, and I believe regardless of how old you are, you should be trying to chase things. You should want to be the best person that you want. And so I just can't imagine a life for myself where I'm not chasing after something, where I'm not wanting to be better. I can't imagine a life where I don't have a fire burning inside of me that I have to listen to. And so whatever it is, just find your passion and chase after it.
Devery, appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much for diving into it with us here on the podcast, and all the best in your future endeavors.
Good luck to you guys, too. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Thanks again to Devery Keere for joining us this week. We'd also like to thank all of you for downloading and listening to the podcast, which you can hear on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and Podbean. And if it allows, don't forget to leave us a rating and review, as those kinds of things help spread the word. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more stories on baseball's past, present, and future in our province. Until next time, thanks again for all of your support, no matter the platform, of Alberta Dugout Stories.